When boys and girls live in the same home, awkward situations can arise. Sometimes I've heard even brothers and sisters develop certain affections. And when those affections become common knowledge, well, that is an awkward situation. Indeed, especially in a prominent family.
I loved Littlefinger's character in A Game of Thrones, but this scene is a perfect example of what frustrated me about his character's adaptation on the show. As someone who has read and completely obsessed over the A Song of Ice and Fire books, I can recognize that this is just something that the real Littlefinger would never do. The real Littlefinger would never be this reckless with a secret like this, revealing it so openly and directly to Cersei. It just makes this version of Littlefinger look like he is careless and reactionary, because he only says this after Cersei seemingly insults him about something from his childhood.
I heard a song once about a boy of modest means. Found his way into the home of a very prominent family. He loved the eldest daughter. Sadly, she had eyes for another.
That's all I needed. That's all I needed for him to do that, and it became personal with me.
Only then does Littlefinger reveal Cersei's secret to her, letting her know what he knows with so much arrogance and brazenness. This actually gives Cersei a reason not to trust him, something that Book Littlefinger would never do. Book Littlefinger thrives on the trust that he gets from other people, because it lets him know that their guard is down and that he can manipulate them a lot easier. This is why he basically begs Ned Stark not to trust him.
I did warn you not to trust me.
Littlefinger uses his amicable nature and charming personality to win people over. And then once he does, he is able to influence them into doing whatever he wants. This is how he orchestrates the entire War of the Five Kings. He knows that Lysa Arryn loves him and would do whatever it takes to be with him. And so he uses that to get her to poison Jon Arryn, write a letter to Catelyn Stark, and basically kickstart the entire war that the series is based on. In the books, Littlefinger is careful and a lot more cunning. And what makes him particularly dangerous is the fact that he hides this behind a friendly and charming persona. Littlefinger is everybody's friend, and so everybody trusts him and confides in him. He makes people laugh, he helps them get money, and he negotiates on their behalf in order to win over allies. People love him, and they completely trust him, which is exactly what Littlefinger wants, because it enables him to manipulate them a lot easier.
There was a line in a recent episode of the show where he's not even present, but two people were talking about him, and someone says, well, no one trusts Littlefinger, and Littlefinger has no friends. And that's true of television show Littlefinger. But it's certainly not true of Book Littlefinger. If Book Littlefinger in the book, everybody trusts him.
And there are many things that Littlefinger does in the novels that never made it on the show. Plots that show his brilliance and long-term planning, but which also are easy to miss because you don't even suspect Littlefinger is behind them. On the show, there's a scene where Tywin Lannister talks about how broke the Lannisters actually are, stressing to Cersei that it is important for them to find the money for these debts and to pay them off as quickly as they can.
The Crown owes the Iron Bank of Bravos a tremendous amount of money.
How much?
A tremendous amount. You can't run from them, you can't cheat them, you can't sway them with excuses. If you owe them money and you don't want to crumble yourself, you pay it back.
On the show, this problem exists because the Lannisters don't have any more gold since their mines are dry. But in the books, it's a lot more complicated than that. This problem is as a result of Littlefinger himself, because when he was Robert's Master of Coin, he borrowed money recklessly from the Iron Bank and other wealthy lenders in order to make sure that the crown was in debt and that the Lannisters wouldn't be able to pay it back. It is actually Littlefinger who orchestrates the economic decline of the realm. But the thing is, while the crown is in crippling debt and is scurrying around for money, Littlefinger himself is investing his money on lucrative businesses around the city, increasing his wealth and becoming extremely rich. His plan becomes obvious once you notice this. Littlefinger wants the crown to fall in debt so that when they are looking for someone to rescue them, he will be the only one with enough money to help them. They will all depend on him, and that will mean that he will have all of the power. Tyrion recognizes this a bit too late. He thinks to himself, a master juggler was PETYR Baelish. Oh, he was clever. He did not simply collect the gold and lock it in a treasure vault. No, he paid the king's debt in promises and put the king's gold to work. He bought wagons, shops, ships, houses. He bought grain when it was plentiful and sold bread when it was scarce. He bought wool from the north and linen from the south and lace from Lys, stored it, moved it, dyed it, sold it. The golden dragons bred and multiplied, and Littlefinger lent them out and brought them home with hatchlings. And in the process, he moved his own men into place. The keepers of the keys were his, all four. The king's counter and the king's scales were men he'd named. The officers in charge of all three mints, harbor masters, tax farmers, customs sergeants, wool factors, toll collectors, pursers, wine factors. 9 of every 10 belonged to Littlefinger. No one had ever thought to question the appointments, and why should they? Littlefinger was no threat to anyone. A clever, smiling, genial man, everyone's friend, always able to find whatever gold the king or his hand required, and yet of such undistinguished birth, one step up from a hedge knight who was not a man to fear. But do I dare touch him? Tyrion wondered. Tyrion basically recognizes how dependent the realm is on Littlefinger when it is too late to actually do anything. Littlefinger has entangled himself so much in the realm's finances that getting rid of him would basically cripple the economy. On the show, a lot of this was cut out from the storyline, probably in an effort to simplify things since a lot of Littlefinger's plots are still ongoing in the series. It's actually a shame because Dan and Dave cut out a lot of things about Littlefinger that continue to be fascinating for book fans today. For example, they basically simplified the way that Littlefinger took over the Vale, because in the show, he lies to them and Sansa supports his lie, and then he becomes the Lord of the Vale just like that. It's very much a simplified version of what happens in the books, because in A Feast for Crows, he manipulates the Lords of the Vale into thinking that he is their ally, when they actually despise him and want him to leave. Instead, he convinces them to give him a year to turn things around for the Vale, and if he fails, then he will step down on his own accord. He does this so persuasively that it plays out like a slow-burning masterclass on manipulation. Even Sansa is confounded about how he did it. She thinks to herself, he bewitched them. She could not have said where the suspicion came from, but once it crossed her mind, it would not let her sleep. Finally, she rose and dressed herself, leaving Gretchel to her dreams. PETYR was still awake, scratching out a letter. "Elaine," he said, "my sweet, what brings you here so late? I had to know. What will happen in a year?" He put down his quill. "Redfort and Waynwood are old. One or both of them may die. Gilwood Hunter will be murdered by his brothers, most likely by young Harlan, who arranged Lord Eon's death. In for a penny, in for a stag, I always say. Belmore is corrupt and can be bought. Templeton I shall befriend. Bronzion Royce will continue to be hostile, I fear, but so long as he stands alone, he is not so much a threat. And Selyn Corbray?" The candlelight was dancing in his eyes. "Selyn will remain my implacable enemy. He will speak of me with scorn and loathing to every man he meets, and lend his sword to every secret plot to bring me down." That was when her suspicion turned to certainty. And how shall you reward him for the service? With gold and boys and promises, of course. Selyn is a man of simple tastes, my sweetling. All he likes is gold and boys and killing. Littlefinger bribes those he can and charms those he can't. But what makes him so dangerous is the fact that he is a meticulous planner and he is very patient. A year is plenty of time for his plan to come into fruition, and he doesn't mind waiting for those results. This is what bothers me about Littlefinger just handing Sansa over to the Boltons in Game of Thrones, because Littlefinger would never, ever do that. Sansa herself is a pawn to Littlefinger, and he has plans with her, which is why he plots to have Sansa married to the future heir of the Vale, Sir Harold Harding, or Harry the Heir as he is known by fans. Since Sweet Robin is sickly and so very young, he wagers that the boy will die and that Harry, his cousin, will inherit the Vale. Therefore, he tells Sansa to seduce him so that he can fall in love with her, putting her in a position where she can rule the Vale beside him. By this point in the story, Sansa is pretending to be Littlefinger's bastard daughter, so perhaps he will use that to grab power for himself. But it's still too early to tell without the next book installment. The point is, Littlefinger would never give up Sansa. He sees her as a long-term investment, so he would never just hand her over to someone else. Book Littlefinger is a far more calculated, patient, and manipulative mastermind than his show counterpart. He uses trust, financial control, and long-term strategizing to shape the realm's future, trying to make sure that he stands triumphant when the chaos ends and the dust clears. Although the show reduces him to a reckless schemer by the end, in the books he is a man who thrives in the shadows, orchestrating chaos while appearing completely harmless. His economic sabotage, control over the Vale, and careful grooming of Sansa show what a meticulous genius he is, a man who is still playing the long game. Not only does that make him one of the most dangerous characters in the entire story, but I also think that makes him a lot better in the books than he was on the show. But what do you think? Do you prefer Littlefinger's portrayal on the show or in the books? And what's your favorite thing about Littlefinger's character in the story? Let me know down below in the comments section, and if you liked this video, click the thumbs up button and subscribe for more content in the future. Thank you for watching. Peace.